To my RoboFun audience. I am Laura Hart. I'm the CEO and founder of RoboFun, and I'm so happy to be here with my colleague, David Gagnon, who is a scientist and a game maker from the University of Chicago. Excuse me, the University of Wisconsin-Madison. We're talking about Chicago, right?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, David. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good, good. I'm going to do a few housekeeping things about RoboFun, and we're going to learn all about what David does, which is incredibly cool. So RoboFun, for those of you who may not be aware, is a company that helps kids love to learn by using creative technology. So our children come to our studio and make games, or make robots, or make stop motion animations, or learn through Minecraft about circuitry. We are running a ton of classes, both in person and online, for Christmas. So if you are looking for a way to enjoy your children but have some time off, come and check us out. We're at robofun.org, which is our URL, or call us up at 212-245-0444, and we would love to work with your 3 to 13-year-old. We have lots of programs. We work with schools throughout the 5 boroughs as well. And every week I have one of these to help my audience learn about cool things going on in the world of learning. And David came to me from another game maker. And David does incredibly cool work. So do you want to tell us a little bit about what your work is and how you got there?
Yeah, okay, so the work part is I direct a group called Field Day at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. Mm-hmm. A much, much better university than the University of Chicago, of course.
Of course.
And we're in a education research group, but we also, we're a studio. Uh-huh. And the really high level part of it, I think, would be that we make games that are used by millions of kids, and we do it from a strong theoretical basis. And then we use those games to understand and study learning.
So instead of having your son or daughter being home playing Mario, they could be home playing a game where a number of things are happening. A, they're learning about a topic in history, in science, and meanwhile, you're collecting data to understand how effective the game is for the child who's playing it. Is that a correct way to put it?
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say that it's really kind of 2 parts of it, right? So we're trying to make better, I mean, at the end of the day, we want to help kids not only learn in the traditional sense, but we're looking to create kids that have curiosity about subjects they didn't know exist. We want to unstick kids' fear of math and science. We've got all these aims that we're going towards, and certainly we're using game data to try to do that better, right?
Right.
So we're constantly trying to figure out how do we do that job better. Mm-hmm. But the other side of it is more theoretical, and one step behind that, which is to say, how do kids form meaning around a certain topic, mm-hmm. and how can we use games as a media as a way to learn about kids? Like, how can we use it as a new kind of instrument that we just didn't have before? Right. So there's a whole bunch of kind of researchy, sciencey things that are going on, using the actual game, the thing that has impact, also as the instrument.
It's kind of a meta, lots of layers going on there.
There are, yeah. And some of it, I think, is just that I've been inspired by the good side of what we have done with our very rapid optimization of things like online shopping. Mm-hmm. And there's been some lessons learned in that, that mm-hmm. there's ways that you can experiment to find out if one version of a thing is better than another version of a thing. Mm-hmm. And you can do that very rapidly when you have a large audience. Right. And that is very exciting for education, because unlike a textbook, that you put into the world and you maybe can revise it every few years, mm-hmm. We can make changes to our things that are out in the wild, like on the fly. And that is just a really exciting capacity for seeing education, the quality of educational products improve, that we're excited to leverage. I guess the big difference is that at the end of the day, having kids that are full of wonder and awe is a lot harder to measure than whether someone put their credit card in. So we've got our task cut out for us
Right.
with trying to measure things that are more interesting,
Right.
especially given that we give everything away for free.
Right.
Yeah.
So for our audience, you have a child at home. We're all facing perhaps a third, fourth, whatever, wherever you are in the world, wave with this new variation. Can mom of Cindy, age 5, go play a field day game right now with her child for free?
Yeah, quite a few of them. There's kind of a couple ways to get at them. Through PBS Learning Media or PBS Wisconsin, our games will come up.
Okay.
We also have a great partnership with Brain Pop. So if you go to it's called Game Up, it's their gaming section.
Okay, so Brain Pop, though, I think you have to have a subscription.
No, the games are all free. So
okay.
The Brain Pop Game Up part, where all their games are at, that's all free. And then the third one is through Legends of Learning, which is it's another private group, but they're free for kids and parents to interact with. So the final one, obviously, is you can get to our website, and that's where you're going to only see our stuff. But those are some of the gateways that point to us.
Okay, so I'm going to give everyone Field Day. It's fieldday.org.
That works, or fielddayLab.wis.edu. Either is fine.
Field Day Lab or Field Day Lab.
Yep.
Dot.
WISC.
I'm sorry.
WISC. .edu. But
okay. All right. And David, in his career, has made dozens of games. And as we're talking, after this, we will put up the links to the other locations that you mentioned, which are other free educational games for kids, for those people who may be interested. We kind of have jumped past. How did you get here, David? I mean, you're doing amazing work. You run a studio within a university. You have the advantage of both the university intellect, but you're also a commercial operation running, making games commercial in the way that you're making them for free. So you have a lot of constraints. You're not doing this with massive budgets. So let's get back to that. But how did you get to this place in your life?
Yeah, I mean, the short version of it is that I've always really been excited about designing experiences for people. Mm-hmm. From being someone who loved to like role play as a kid in high school, then later got into music event production and put together lots of all-night parties with massive sound systems and lasers and that kind of thing. And I also really always loved community building around that. So like, even when I first moved up to Madison as a young person, I was really excited about the idea that something like putting on a techno music event could be something that could be so community building, and that we could have a huge volunteer staff that would show up just to do it for everybody else.
Right.
And really amazing things could happen. So
I'm hearing some themes of loving to bring together a group of people and loving to learn a new thing.
Absolutely. And technology, I think, would probably be the other part of it. I've just always loved computers. I was a kid with a VIC-20, the cheaper version of the Commodore 64.
When I started my career as a teacher, right before I was hired at the Buckley School, the principal of the school got some sort of deal, and we had like 200 Commodore 64s. And it was quite a challenge for me at 21, 22, figuring out how to get them all going. And we did. Taught at that time, it was BASIC and Logo. So,
that's great.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if you take that same spirit forward a little bit, though, through a number of events from, seeing my in-laws that worked in Namibia for 20 years, starting schools and kind of encountering kind of education on the ground as a community developing enterprise. And then later instructional design, I think a lot of arrows very quickly started pointing towards games. I was part of many instructional design projects that had the kind of typical next button with an animation and then a quiz where if you get the first one wrong, you go and pick the second one until you eventually lockpick your way through it. And as I started studying learning theory, and then later went into graduate work, really trying to understand this, games are just a really compelling media for learning. They provide contexts for people to actually be inside of, so it's not decontextualized like a math problem. You're working,
Right. Yep.
you're solving
Oh,
problems.
that's interesting.
Totally, you're using tools. You're working towards the end of something. You're getting immediate feedback. So I can go into depth around that, but a lot of things started to point to games as a really optimal learning environment,
Mm-hmm.
and combine that with a background in kind of media design and production and event design. It
Right.
feels pretty natural.
Right. All of these worlds came together.
Yeah.
So you're designing places for kids to learn. So you have the community element and you have the element of learning. So
Yeah, and our studio is really an incredible group of people. So I feel like we still have that little posse of driven, excited, missional people that are artists and storytellers and researchers and people that like to facilitate interaction with educators. So we've got a pretty diverse group that moves across kind of the arts and sciences, and from things that are really researchy to very production oriented. So that new little posse is it's just an incredible team to be part of.
I realize part of my joy in running a company, which sounds similar, is the community part of it. I have this little, I call it my RoboFun family. And then at various times, I just got through, as something you're very familiar with, a grant writing frenzy for about 6 weeks working on a large state grant. But there's something very joyful about this. We're going to try to get this grant. We're going to work together. And although fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of it is over Zoom now, there's this sense of the community coming together for a common goal, and something in our rather fractured society that I find very meaningful. So
absolutely. I mean, to some degree, I think for better or worse, never have been good at kind of separating personal and work. They're really integrated, and that just means that I love waking up in the morning, most mornings, and feeling like, okay, we're going to do something really meaningful today.
Right.
That doesn't just end up with like someone somewhere making an extra dollar. It ends up with something I really believe in. And our team shares that, so everybody has that in their own way.
That's very cool. That is very, very cool. So David, do you want to show us a game?
Sure. I've got a couple that we can pick through, and I think one of the best ways to do it is actually to play a short video of a game called Joe Wilder and the Capital Case.
Okay.
And that'll give it kind of a nice little quick intro, and then we'll crack open the game and maybe do a little bit of like voiceover, just talking about like why we built it the way we built it.
Great.
What happens? Okay.
Excellent. Excellent.
Let me hit the share tab. Okay, and you're set.
All right.
I'll just play this from the beginning.
Sounds good.
Okay, so Joe Wilder is a game that is really for grade 3 through 6. And let's see, I might have to change my sharing settings if we're going to look at that now. It is a collaboration between Field Day Lab and PBS Wisconsin, and it's a slightly older game now. We've had it out for a couple of years. That's the wrong one.
You tell me when you want me to add another screen. But I want to say that you have created the opportunity for me to go down the rabbit hole of playing it this afternoon rather I'm like, oh, this looks like a fun way to spend a couple of hours learning.
Yeah, and that's probably what we're talking about too, is that it's designed to be played in a single class period,
Okay.
and that's not accidental.
Mhm.
We're really looking for things that fit within the existing world of school. So as soon as you start talking about games, you can go down a couple different routes, and you definitely can be thinking about games like Fortnite or games like World of Warcraft, or any game, and how informally they can be these amazing experiences where kids form communities and they learn how to game the game, and they peer train one another, and a lot of people study that, and that's fantastic. But our work is centered really on games as an effective form of teaching and learning that can work in schools today. And as such, this game was designed with a group of, I don't know how many actually, 3 cohorts of 15 teachers with lots of overlap. So we worked, alongside of this amazing group of teachers we call Field Day Fellows, as well as folks from the Wisconsin Historic Society, to really find the intersection between what is it that historians do. Like if your job title is archivist or historian, and you get up and brush your teeth in the morning, what do you do in your day, right? What are the practices of learning about what history, is? And then we had to kind of partner that up with, okay, so now you're a 4th grade teacher, in Middleton, Wisconsin. What do you need? What are you teaching? What standards do you need to fulfill? Right. What context you're in? So the game really came out of that intersection.
So it's quite an intersection. You're the hub between what do people want their children to learn, those are the teachers, and what resources are available to make that happen from museums or various other people who are on the other side of participating in this. Is that a correct way to look at it?
I think that's it, but it might miss the heart of it, for me at least, which is that we want to make things that really fit within schools and really meet the needs of teachers, right? And at the same time, we want to push a little bit toward a way of teaching and learning that is focused on practices. What do historians actually do? And what historians actually do is a little different than how history is taught. Right. Does that make sense?
Yes, totally.
And we really think that games are a place where we can bring that together and have the player inhabit and become a little historian and take on the roles and actions and values and vocabulary of whatever practice we're in. Does that make sense?
Sure. So it's instead of thinking as if you are. Thinking as if you were a historian, you are a historian when playing the game.
Exactly. And then there's another layer to that too, which is, as we're going to meet our main character here real quick. But we're going to be, in this game at least, we're not going to be a little historian who wants to be a little historian and is an obedient little historian. But we're going to play Joe Wilder, a scrappy kid who loves her grandpa, and hangs out in the basement of the Historic Society with her pet badger, and is being dragged reluctantly into having to use history practices in order to kind of defend her grandpa's good honor. Interesting.
Mega story within a story. So
yeah, there's just kind of layers to that. And we'll see one of the first clues here, for example.
Wait. So I'll add it to the screen. I didn't want it to crash. So, okay.
Oops, I just lost my tab. Are you seeing the right one?
Yep, we're seeing it. We're seeing it now.
Yeah, so here, this is one of the first clues that we encountered. We're playing this Joe Wilder character. And here's our, this is the basement of the historical center, her pet badger. And we just found this clue that said Grandpa, her grandpa looks like he's in trouble with her boss. So we make our way upstairs, and this is it's called a point and click adventure game. That's kind of the genre that it falls in. And as you can see, there's a good bit of reading in this as we kind of let this narrative unfold. And we're finding that this character, who we haven't heard his name yet, is accusing Grandpa of losing stuff. And you kind of get involved, and he's pretty humble and says, "Oh, things do keep going missing." So we're already setting up a tension, like right out of the gate, that we don't like this character that we're going to find out his name is Wells, because he doesn't like our grandpa. And at the same time, the thing that we get into right away is the boss, here, this woman with the purple hair, she's trying to figure out, well, there's this artifact that we found. What is it? We need to put together an exhibit at the museum that's going to talk about what it is. So we've got these like layers of things already happening in the first couple seconds, right? We're really like dug into the interpersonal tension of some people at work. And then we're also like starting to be presented with some of this idea of like, what is this thing? But what you'll see in this game is that the entire time, the character that you play, Joe Wilder, she's not all bought in. She's not like looking to sign up to be taught how to do history and anything like that. She's just kind of brought along, but at the end of the day, does all the things that historians do.
She's bought in just like her grandpa.
Yeah. And this is something that we really like playing with, are these ideas of like meeting a kid where they're at and not assuming that all kids are model students that are already gung-ho about learning the things that adults want to teach them, and instead giving them a little space to not necessarily be bought in, but they still play along. This game's really, really well received.
Right. So, how do you want to show more? I have some more questions, but could we show more?
Yeah, let me show one more little spot here. So the mechanic of the game is kind of a mix of storytelling and then these close inspection screens where we end up like looking for clues, right?
Okay.
And we pick up clues, and in this case, we find this little tag on this shirt that Wells thinks is a basketball jersey, from a women's basketball jersey. And we see this little tag. It's got a date on it, a number, and this stuff all starts going into our notebook, where we're kind of collecting the clues that we picked up along the way. So the way that this is going to play out is we're going to end up meeting with, in this case, folks at a dry cleaner, or like a cleaning service that existed that we track that tag down to, and we're going to learn a little bit more about this object there, and then we're going to end up meeting with some other folks that were, give us clues along the way, and we're going to find out that this object was misrepresented. It's definitely not a basketball jersey. The women's basketball team didn't exist for many, many years later, but it ends up being a tunic that was used during the marches of the early women's suffrage movement, right? When women were.
Wow.
So it's funny how within games you have practices like how do you collect evidence, corroborate evidence, argue, from evidence, but then you always have content as well. And in this game, we're gonna introduce the idea of the women's suffrage movement and the foundation of Earth Day through Aldo Leopold's work. So games are really exciting in this regard. I'll stop here, the screen share, in that you always have a layer of practice, right? And these are the verbs and mechanics of the game. But then you're doing those practices within some content or some context. And that's when we get to explore kind of the amazing stuff that happens in history and science and art and math. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. My mind is worrying as I run RoboFun, but I was a teacher, and I'm just curious, like, how do you know, like, how do you get feedback from your kids that they like it, they don't like it? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I mentioned the fellowship program, and that has really had this incredible effect, which is by working closely with a cohort of educators that teach us about how business is done. They end up then being kind of an extension of the testing and production process, where they facilitate playtests with their kids. So from that, we get a couple kind of streams back, right? One of them is that we'll hop on, and Zoom has been fantastic for this, but we'll do think alouds with kids. So we'll listen to them play, and they'll tell us what they're thinking. We have the teacher observations that they capture and give us kind of a little journal entry. We get students to either do, surveys or some sort of little journaly thing. And then we get the game analytics themselves. So we look at who did what in the game. And when we're in the latter stages of production, so we're in this right now heavy for 2 games, all of those sources are kind of coming at us. So playtests are lined up like every.
You're getting data from all different places,
and they're just coming in like a hose,
Yeah.
And we're hearing stuff in kids' own words, which are are strange and
it's always the best.
Yeah. And we're just getting to hear them play, and then we're also getting all these data streams that are saying things like, for example, when you saw in Joe Wilder where we left Grandpa's little attic closet spot and we went upstairs, that scene of being in the basement with the elevator and the staircase, through data, we realized that kids were getting stuck and they were going back into the attic space and wasting time there. And it was not productive struggle. It was just, so we redesigned that scene 3 times based just on the data streams that were coming in until we got the kind of result that we wanted.
So this is the flip side of Facebook collecting data from us that we don't want them to collect. You're collecting, nothing personal about the kids, but just watching how they play your game and what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, that's right. And what's great about being at a university in that regard is that we have a thing called the Institutional Review Board, which means when we want to do things, we have to create what's called a human subjects protocol, and we have to think through the ethics of every single part of what we do. And we need to make a case for why that puts no one at risk, and why we're doing it the way we're doing it. And for us, that's meant that if we anonymize in certain ways and use data in certain ways and don't even collect anything that could ever be used to ever figure out who a kid is, that we can do that with a kind of a benevolent approach.
Well, none of the information about a child would be helpful. You just want to. You don't need anything personal. None of that is helpful. What's helpful is what's working. What as they're playing the game, where are they getting stuck, or where are you seeing a tremendous amount of learning going on?
That's right. Because at the end of the day, we're not really interested in trying to. Well, so we're certainly not interested in trying to sell anybody anything, but we're also not trying to necessarily track someone across, a bunch of games or something like that. The thing that we're really excited about is being able to learn from large audiences that are playing our games in order to help that small percentage that is getting stuck not get stuck and know how to intervene. And that's what I do have to say, though, that's where the playtests are very rewarding, to actually get some time with kids.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because you just get to hear the anecdotes and stuff, because so much of what we do ends up being kind of data driven.
Sure.
And, as much as I love it, it takes away all of the my little ambitions to be a Mr. Rogers kind of character for all these kids. It takes away that face-to-face when you're
yeah. That's a nice image to have of your role in the world, to be a Mr. Rogers character behind the scenes creating these incredible learning experiences.
Well, I really like the idea that Mr. Rogers, as an educator, was able to say, hey, let's use whatever media we can.
Right.
That's one thing I really like. The other one is that let's be artists, right? So there's the quality of what happened in that program was just amazing, right? But then the other one is like, let's think about kids as whole beings that have feelings. And maybe they had a crappy day today. Maybe they got yelled at on their way to school. And I feel like our work is really, again, missional to me, because I know that for a couple million kids, we get to be 30 minutes of pure encouragement and pure invitation into wonder, right? We get to be that in their day. And it's working, right? We know it works. So that's just exciting to get to be in that role of like using this media and using art, and I guess learning theory in the six, in order to have that moment with kids.
So David, we are coming towards the end of our time, and this is sort of a beautiful moment to stop. And I know we were going to look at more demographics and where people are playing, but I think we should hold off on that for another time together. But before we go, tell us like how many people are playing these games, and why don't we do that little piece, and then you'll come back in a month or two. I was also thinking it'd be fun to walk through your studio and meet all the people involved in these things if you're game. So.
Yeah, it really is fun to realize like the kinds of people that are involved, from
Right.
musicians, and storytellers. It's not a bunch of people at computers.
Right.
That's not what it looks like. Well, let's see. So, each game has, got its own kind of trajectory, but if you summarize it all together, we're getting about 1.5 million plays a year right now of the kind of collection of games, right? So practically that breaks down to, 35 to 50,000 plays a week that, we're having during the school year. We're really associated with the school year, so our stuff isn't used much informally, so it really kind of ebbs and flows with school.
Right. Although I would put for parents looking for ways to connect with your children, this seems like a really cool thing to do one night, to play the Joe Wilder game with your child. It should take about an hour. Would you recommend something like that?
Yeah, and I'm a huge fan of playing with kids.
Yep.
Right. Just to have that time just to go back and forth and think about it. Let them drive, of course.
Right.
But yeah, I really do like that. And, Joe Wilder's a good one. We have a game on shipwrecks that's coming out here in just a month or so that we're really excited about, and doing history practices to explore shipwrecks. Lakeland's another very popular game that has to do with understanding how farms and our kind of corn and milk production relate to the quality of our lakes, and trying to understand those systems. So it's a little older one. Or games like Aqualab that are getting really deep into complex systems of like, how is science done? Like, how do we know what we know? Like, what is an experiment? What is a model? And that's another game that we're in the middle of releasing, here in just the next couple months. So our website's full of a couple of places to get started. There's certainly a bunch of stuff there, and then we've got a bunch to come. A game about journalism we're in production on right now, and practices.
So we are going to revisit in a month or two and learn more, because what you're doing is incredibly needed and cool. And before we go, just a pitch. How do you fund this? How does that happen?
Yeah, it's really two ways. The first way is the more traditional one, where I write a grant to the National Science Foundation or the Endowment for the Humanities, and we say we want to do a new kind of science and study learning, and we want to learn how to teach math better.
Right. Okay.
That's one way. And then the other way is that we're surrounded by people, in the university system that are doing research that don't have anything to do with education, and they have a mandate through their funder to disseminate what they're learning.
I see.
So for example, we've got a bunch of VR experiences that are coming out that are all centered around research that's happening on the poles. So the North and South Pole, doing really interesting forms of ecology research and really interesting forms of like astrophysics and astronomy. But it's, how do you find out about that? What is a neutrino? Right. So we create games about that scale that research to the public.
And so would the neutrino game also be at like an hour, or does that go deeper and longer?
That one in particular is 7 minutes long. It is a museum exhibit VR game. It was really thinking about like a museum setup.
Okay.
So yeah, it's super short, and that's a challenge. Like,
that is a super challenge to make real content, but it also fits very well in our life of too many things going on in little pieces of time.
Yeah.
So, it has been just a delight to talk to you, and very, very exciting. I have your website up there, and we're going to talk to you in a month or two and learn more. But thank you for your time, and thank you for what you're doing for the world. You're putting out really good products that are totally free. So teachers watching this, parents watching this, go to David's site, and you can get more games and learn more about his work.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Sure. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.